I saw. I saw. They went to the top of the pyramid and they were transfigured in the green light. And they both spoke the holy words to the deity in agreement, the two of them, the one in her fine robes and the other in his plain clothes, but they knew what to say. I watched from the edge of the top of the pyramid, and the force of it was blasting us off and tumbling us down the steps. And they were transfigured and they blended, Theoxa. They merged into the column of green light and shot up. I think they're going to go kill God. But we couldn't stay there. The energy is too much. The whole temple's going to do something. It's a catastrophe.
Argox is it's gone.
Perhaps to save us all.
Well, you're a priest. How does that pyramid work? How do we go to where she is? Does she come back?
That's
Tell
when
me.
the top of the pyramid explodes. In effectively a volcano of green plasma, shattering it from within, the force of the column finally shattering the top half of the pyramid into smithereens above you. You can see it from down here. Remember, you can see the pyramid from down here? I told you earlier.
Mm-hmm. I'm shouting inarticulately, just and then Argox,
Mm-hmm.
just looking up. I can't believe that this has happened. I mean, I have to go. I'm, taking steps up the road and then seeing, the conflagration and stopping, and I think I'm good for nothing at the moment.
All right. So, shall we close it out?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you can resolve that goal of yours, Noah.
Yeah, I think so too. There might be a new one though.
Well, I have to say the dice conspired for a hell of a climax. I mean, the relic was, there was room for the relic to have been in different hands and been used for something else. I mean, all of that was possible. Um, so anyway, I will be talking a lot about what I did before each session, and I'm really interested in how do things change in a scene. How do we go from scene to scene? And what was the situation? How is it affected by scenes and then rebound upon them for their content as we went along? Right? That's the idea. So I think it'll be a fine example of that, especially because I usually don't get like such a glorious, such a glorious ending with.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, as the end of an arc, it's pretty amazing, and
Yeah. Not gonna talk to Theoxa in the near time, just making sure that she eats and
Right.
drinks and
Yeah,
sleeps.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Kind of.
Well, and it is very fun, Ron, to see you kind of figuring out how to GM, the hack as well. I
Right.
know.
Right. No, I had to.
I don't know how about my experience with Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say some of it was game design on the fly. But the trouble with
Yeah,
that is that you have to know, did I just have a brilliant epiphany of how the game works, or am I just fucking with events so that it goes a fun way? Right.
right.
So some of the decisions that I made may actually be cautionary lessons to say, don't do that.
I mean, it's
Right.
difficult
Mm-hmm.
not to kind of get carried away.
Mm-hmm.
There is some story developing the way it did for us now
Mm-hmm.
during those sessions. It's nice to play, but it's dangerous too.
Right. Right.
If you get
I think so.
it's
Fortunately, and I did not make up the fate and intuition rules. They, as we mentioned before, they're a little bit tuned toward the game master being able to control the story in the rules. But if you look at them and read them sort of legalistically or subversively, then you can interpret them in a different way, which is that luck can be not good for the story or good for the character in service of the story, but more like, okay, what is the character trying to do, and how, or more accurately, what's the sort of the least bad thing, the least most dangerous thing, the thing that will put the character in the most advantage given everything going on. Okay, that's the awesome luck result, right? And between that and the intuition, which basically it's when one of the big curses in role playing, and I've talked about this in previous seminars, is when there is a lot of um, uh, asymmetric knowledge. So the game master knows who killed the butler, and then the question is, if you're in a game where you really would enjoy the other people putting two and two together. So you're not just going to give them four, at specific intervals. You would like actually the players to sort of get it, right? And say this, to deduce things. Now, the trouble is that Agatha Christie can have the characters in her books do whatever they want and deduce or not deduce whatever she wants. So it's not like writing a mystery. And it's not like presenting a mystery either, because the reader does not actually dope out the mystery. That's something mystery readers, sort of play as a little tautological game in their heads. But if they keep reading, the detective will figure it out for them. So therefore, you kind of are asking a lot to actually present the mystery as the detective sees it and expect the players to do that, right? Because the detective
in
in the fiction,
character.
yeah, the detective in the fiction, of course, has the benefit of being the protagonist, and the author will make sure they dope it out, in due time. And the players, of course, are not going to have that. I mean, the game master doesn't want to do that. So he wants them to be Agatha Christie detectives, but he's not going to give them the Agatha Christie detective advantage, which is the GM. So I mean, I don't know. Noah, have you ever been in one of these agonizing role playing mysteries? Right?
No, I
Okay.
haven't. The benefit
Right.
of only being seriously playing for a year or a
Well,
year and a half.
this is the kind of thing where the poor game master, whom you have to feel for, because they don't want to just feed you this story, but they really, really want you to figure out that A plus B equals 7. They really want you to. And they have shoved A at you. They have shoved B at you. They have shoved 6 at you and 8. And those don't work. So it's got to be fucking 7, people. Come on. Right? Come on. and of course it doesn't work because, that doesn't the connections necessary, the ability to empathize with not knowing it, right? And then you don't want to tell them. So you get these things where I've actually had players just look me in the eye and say, "Oh, will you just shut the fuck up and tell me what it is that you think we're supposed to be figuring out right now?
Right.
Come on." Okay? And I've been on the other side. So I've been kind of been on both sides of the table and realized that this is not a very functional, creative, it's not a very functional, creative thing.
I mean, it
So,
gets even worse because I'm looking at my fate and I'm looking at all those things I don't have there, which puts me very, very far down when it comes to intuition.
well,
And even if I would figure it out, you wouldn't have a chance in this world to get me to let my character figure that out.
right. So
Unless the
right.
dice are going completely crazy.
So the fun for me in this game is that I do have the intuition rolls. So that when I say, oh, they should really figure that one out, or they could, given like when you were running across the top of the pyramid and the thing, the round thing, it was glowing green. So that's why I had 13 make an intuition check. The Oxa, forget it. She's like running, right, and focusing. But 13, I'm thinking, glowing green. She saw the green there.
So what?
So we make the intuition check, and good knows it's inferior. So not going to happen. So do you see what I mean? I can do that. And then I can just, instead of saying, oh, those morons, why don't they figure it out? Why don't they look? Why don't they ask that person? Why don't they do this thing? Instead of saying that, I can say, failed roll, consequences, and just go on from there, right? See what I mean? I can actually live with you guys not doing that, and you can know that I've kind of got your back for your characters being bright enough fictionally when they do get it, right? So it's kind of nice just letting that be highly randomized and not. And also, I love the fact that robots are crap at fate and intuition. That makes perfectly good sense, doesn't it? Right?
It does.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else. There's just intuition to figure those things out.
Right.
There's nothing like logic or anything like it.
Right. Right. There's no detecting or deducing or anything like that. And so it is now, of course, if a player says, hey, isn't that this? Then they can act upon it. They can act upon it, and they will either get confirmation based on what they do, or they could get like an intuition check at that point for a good solid, with a good solid shift or something. I don't know. I have to think about that.
Oh, right.
What happens when the player is, saying, hey, that guy could have killed the butler, right? And be right. And so the thing to do is just to say, okay, just act upon it, and we'll just play out the consequences. And I suppose I don't see a downside to that, actually. I don't even see why they should need a roll, right? They can just act upon it and move from there.
And it kind of it preserves us from having to have like a shared genre in mind, or
right.
some like palette of shared fictional understandings.
Right. This is where we figure it out,
because we
sort
can
of
just
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we can just go to the dice, right?
Yeah, and also you can just blither your way in a great deal of confusion throughout an entire story, and then only sort of at a meta level we say, oh, so that's what was going on, and that's okay, right? Because characters in roguish fantasy stories do that all the time, right? So yeah, I have to say that was not a bad training run for me to see how this thing goes. It helps me round out a few things about the setting or the background material, and it helps me come up with the right way to phrase certain things. And also, yeah, there's some things I'm not going to do again. There's some things I know I'm not going to. I say, okay, don't do that, right, to self, GM wise. I have to think a little bit about which ones. I just know there are some. I'll have to go back through the recordings and think about it. There are points where I kind of winced and said, "Ooh, no, I should have handled that. I had him like regard. We should have used regard coming in, but I just made it up.
I think I never even rolled it.
That's what you should have rolled when you first showed up.
Yeah, but in this community, I wouldn't have had any regard, so
that's not how it works.
I didn't miss it.
true, but that's not how it
Maybe
works.
after the
Yeah.
first fight, but even then.
Regard is much more of a loose mechanic than that. In other words, you show up and they intuitively recognize how important you are, basically.
Which would be kind of a bother if you're a killer and assassin.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, they would recognize you as, oh, that person's dangerous. People who want someone dangerous to do something for them, would start coming up and asking you questions and seeing if you were available. Other people would start blaming each other or getting paranoid about you and stuff like that, depending
which
on the
would
role.
be
Right?
which would be a completely different story.
Perhaps. I mean, it depends on what you mean. It depends. You can also have results that don't mean very much. So, in the that's why I realized after a couple of sessions, wait a minute, we should have had a regard roll. Okay, and I just said, all right, the two most important or most active non-player characters are basically going to know that 13 is a killer and they want 13 to, do what they're good at for them. So it'll be an interesting time. I mean, it'll be interesting when the Oxa figures out or realizes in retrospect, that 13 was aimed like a missile at either of those and kind of was flipping a coin as to which one needed to go.
Not really, actually. Not really. I mean,
oh, you thought about you thought about Ogux for a second, I think. But
yeah, sure. I had to. But then I realized, I mean, traveling with somebody for such a long time does things to you, even if it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, the whole, I think Skaga got me wrong at one point.
Yeah.
And I set him up intentionally. You let me talk, and I'm going to go wild.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that whole scene at the farm, I was trying to keep him from realizing what I may or may not think. I wanted to keep him at arm's length.
Right.
And it succeeded.
It did. No, it did quite well,
really
actually.
well,
yeah.
Which made me kind of, should I have rolled for something? I shouldn't get away with this.
Well, it's kind of a good question. In this game, there are certain, I mean, there's lying and there's sincerity, but you weren't really telling. There was nothing about giving information. So I think, that it was a good idea to, I think it was a good idea just to say, that isn't covered by the rules. That isn't a role. That there are lots of interactions that fall outside of direct, sincere communication and outside of lying, even by omission. I mean, if you were trying to deceive him about something specific, it would be a lie whether you even used words or not. It would still be a lie. But you weren't. I know. I mean, I remember the situation, and I kept looking and saying, roll or not roll? And I kept thinking, no, there isn't a roll here. It was like when you and Ogox were talking.
I thought you would be good enough to kind of figure out the way to handle this kind of situations.
Yeah. So,
simply not to have an opinion.
Right. Oh, nothing like a moral backbone or the lack of one to get you through, right?
Hey, that's a job.
No, I love it. I love it.
You can't have a moral backbone in that job. You're basically working for who pays you.
Well,
and they were both offering equally, so then, at that point, I could have an opinion.
Right.